All right, welcome to our third tutorial video. In this one, as you can see on my screen, we're going to talk about your project visual board. This is something that you'll be working on in the next couple of weeks. And I want to kind of go over what it is and talk about that, but also I'll show you the example of this one that I made. And we'll look at this more closely in detail, but this is a thing that you're kind of creating right here. This video is a little bit different. I'm going to try to do a screen recording and use a little PowerPoint. So what is the visual board? It's a place for you to share what your vision is for your project. You've chosen a topic, you've done some academic research and some background research. Of course, naturally, our project evolves as we do this research. But here in this board, summarize all of that information leading into what your project is going to be like. This is where you demonstrate your vision for the project. It's also the place where you show the ideas that you got from sources, both the academic ones that you did for your literature review and any non-academic background sources that you need. This is where you're going to show me both the ideas that are in there and how they fit together. You'll see in mine, I put the academic sources in dark blue and the non-academic sources here in purple. Just a nice way to distinguish between the types of sources in my board. What you end up creating is really a map of how the ideas that you found to help you do this project fit together and build together, leading to what your research is going to be about, leading to a research question that you have that you're going to try to answer in the project by interviewing people. That's not on your visual board, but that's the goal of this project. Remember, you're doing a research project whose goal is to find something out, and then you will present what you found out in a video at the end of the semester. This visual board kind of summarizes what it is you're trying to figure out and why. There's three parts. There's the topic, what you're interested in studying. You might have some examples from online video platforms or other things that you've had. And you will also have some background non-academic sources. These could be news articles, YouTube videos, anything that kind of gives us information that we might need to understand your topic. You will also include three or possibly more academic sources that you're using, showing what other research has been done in and around the topic that you're interested in. And then finally, it will contain the research question, which is what your project will aim to find out. So there's three sections. How and where you will make it. It's a digital visual board. I did mine here on Canva. Canva is a website. I'm using this for free. It's a whiteboard is what I'm using here. And it's this thing. It's got these sources and stuff from here, and you can move the stuff around. Normally, I can. I can't exactly hear, and it shows that, but you can zoom in, you can read stuff, you can see the sources, and more importantly, you can see how things relate. Here's my academic research over here. This is what my topic is, and then here's the research question. We'll look at this more closely in a minute. So the key component of the visual board are the sources that you need. This is an example from my visual board. Here it is right here. It's this one right here. I just want to go over what kind of information each source needs to have. First, you need an APA style citation. Just like you add into our course sources list, you need to write in proper APA style citation information about what the source is. This is an article in a edited volume. So I did a citation for that. So you need APA style citation for each. You can see here, it's right here. Another thing you need is a link. Here's the link to this. I need to be able to get into the source when I look at your board. One cool thing that you can do is if you have an academic article like this, you can take its DOI and you can copy that link address. If you have a project and you've copied that and you just paste it, you'll get something like this. A little box that one shows where the article is and then gives a link to anybody that wants to look at it. So you can just paste links into that, and in general, where'd mine go? They will turn into these boxes like like this. This one didn't work, but most of these, the link turns into a little thing that you can click to open, and I can open that. So that will give me access to the sources that you use. Pretty simple. The other thing is in bold, in very large font that I can read. What's a key takeaway from this source that really guides your project? Right. So very quickly, I can look at this and say, okay, here's an idea from this source that podcasts were a new type of media, quite separate from other forms, even radio. All of my sources on this board have that, right? We have this, we have these two go with this one, the special characteristics of podcasts that go well with comedy. Times have changed. Podcasts are moving to YouTube. Here's one. This change from the old reality podcast is getting stronger, especially with short video formats. And then we have something about the algorithm here. Short video is very different. So all of these sources have a big, bold takeaway that's easy to read. For fun, I used these kind of text things to kind of give more. This is easy. You would just put one on here, and then you can use that. You can also just make your own text box there. And then you have some notes from the source. In general, these should be paraphrased. Here, I took some bullet point characteristics of what a podcast are from this source. This is something that I found. I did take, and then optional, if you have a thing that's really a nice quote that you think you might use, you can copy paste that quote into there. But in general, we want paraphrased ideas. The last thing that you'll need is a clear link and connection to the other ideas in the board. This is kind of the logic of your project. And this is both maybe the most important and also one of the harder things to do. So mine kind of starts over here. We have podcasts as this new form of media, and this new form of media matches quite well with comedy. And I found this old source from 2015 about uh, podcasting and alternative comedy that has some interesting ideas about why this fit well with comedy. But you can see it's kind of old information. Audio only, no video, not a source of revenue. But this allowed comedians to take control of their own careers in a different kind of way, not having to go through comedy and traditional forms of that. And then this, they talked about how in some of these early podcasts, they got really interesting interviews and stuff because they weren't worried about money. This was a very new form of media. This is another thing. It talks about how uh, podcasts allowed people to be authentic outsiders and new media challenging the owners of industry. So kind of related to what was here. Um, Gave them control over their business, makes them feel authentic because of the format and the way they're able to be in charge of their own material. It let them connect to fans in a new way. And they kind of framed it as this third stage of how comedians got out to the public. First, we had talk shows, then we had television shows, and now we're using podcast. But as we know, podcasts are changing. This really gets to what the topic is podcast on video platforms. And this is an article kind of going over how people watch podcasts nowadays. There's a citation, there's a link. Here's some data that I summarized in my own notes. And that has led to some problems. So, this is a news story about Netflix getting involved in the situation. And it talks here about tiresome torrent of 90-second videos optimized for social media and commented by engagement bots. So now we're getting into short video, right? They're taking podcasts and then they're cutting them into bites. But this is talking about how podcasts are not TV. And part of what's going on here is the strength of the algorithm and how that recommends podcasts to people and gets them to try to do that. And I think that's a key idea with this, right? So this is getting stronger also, and things are starting to move to short video. There's really not any research on comedy podcast short video forms. So we have the algorithm already mentioned here, but I found this article that it doesn't say that much, but it talks about how short video is a very different medium. and it really hasn't been studied. And this article tried to understand the language of short video formats via TikTok. And they talk about how people edit and reuse material from existing videos, i.e., those podcasts, in new variations, right? So this is, I think, an important thing, but it hasn't really been studied by anyone. And that leads me to my research question, which is down here at the bottom. Um, how has this trend of podcasts moving to video, especially short video formats, changed how the media works? Using comedians or comedy podcasts as an example. So this is kind of a case study, maybe, or one example of how we do that. So how has the trend of podcasts moving to video, especially short video, kind of changed what it means to be a podcast or what it means to be a comedy in podcasting, which is where we started out. So you can see the logic of how these different sources fit together to lead to a question that I want to answer. You can also see I have some examples of media. This is a famous comedian podcast from the old school from 2009. And this is a podcast that I've watched, which is this guy, a comedian talking with people. And he's been doing this since 2019. But Keely, now his podcast, this is from the same podcast, but it's in short video form. So you can see how the form of the media has evolved kind of over time. These arrows there are key for helping me clearly see that you understand how these sources fit together to lead you into what it is that you want to study. Hello there, I'm in person now. Um, that's the visual board. Again, it's an overall map of what your project looks like and how that has led you to a research question that you will investigate in the second half of the project. It's a lot of work. It took me a couple hours putting this all together. As you look for those connections and figure out what sources really help you, you get rid of stuff and you cut stuff. And the goal here is to really make it as strongly in your own head as well as in mine what you're interested in studying and what we know about that and how those pieces fit together. We'll be talking about this in a couple of weeks when we meet for one-on-one conferences and go over your visual board. But that's the project. You have a couple of weeks to work on that now. Let me know if you need more time. But I look forward to seeing everybody's projects laid out in a nice, beautiful little visual board that we can talk about together when we meet in conferences.